In this video, we will show how to troubleshoot if you have the symptoms of no image or a blank screen, but you can see an image on the screen with a flashlight and you do have audio. This video applies to the following power supply part number: 09-60CAP030-00. This video applies to the following mainboard part number: Y83862696S. This video applies to the following Vizio TV model number: E600i-B3. In this video, the test that we are showing is checking the voltages. Testing the voltages will help to determine if the problem is either with the power supply board, the main board, or the actual LEDs themselves in the TV. If you have not run the flashlight/backlight test, please click the link in the video to the flashlight test. If there is not a link to click, please go to our channel and find the flashlight test video. After running the flashlight test, if you determine that you do have an image on the screen while using a flashlight and you have audio but no backlights, continue this troubleshooting video. In order to continue troubleshooting, you will need to have the skills, experience, and tools necessary to check voltages on the power supply/LED board. It is necessary that you take the proper precautions to protect yourself, as checking voltages can be dangerous on a TV that is powered on. I have begun by removing the screws and the back cover off my TV. We'll be checking the voltages at various points on both the power supply and the main board in this video. We have highlighted both these boards. Before I begin testing the points, I will plug in my TV, and either on the keypad controller or using the remote, I will power on the TV. This TV setup with the power supply and main board is unique. Some TVs will have the cable going from the power supply to the TV panel to provide power to the LEDs for backlighting. On this TV, the LED drivers are built onto the main board. So we have a cable that goes from the power supply to the main board, and then another cable that goes from the main board to the TV panel. I'm going to start by testing the points here on the main board that go to the TV panel. When I test the points, if they show as 25 volts, that means everything is working well. If we do not have backlights, but all of the voltages are good here at this test point, then the problem is most likely with the LEDs. If I test the points here and they show as 0 volts, then there could be a problem with either the main board, the power supply, or the LEDs in the TV. If I am receiving 0 volts at the connection from the main board to the LEDs, I will want to unplug the TV, then disconnect this cable, and then retest the points with my meter. After I've disconnected the cable, I will plug back in the TV and turn it on to retest. I should receive about 23 volts if everything is working correctly. If I do receive 23 volts, that means there is most likely a problem with the LEDs. If I receive a measurement at 0, that means there could be a problem with the power supply or the main board, and I will keep checking voltages at other points. Next, I will test the points on the main board where the cable connects from the power supply. If I get a measurement of 25 volts, then I would assume there is a problem with the main board, since I am getting 25 volts at this connection from the power supply, but at the points going to the LEDs we have 0. If we have 0 volts at this point, then I will test at the power supply connection. We can check the voltages on the power supply board at the correct cable that runs to the main board. When I test the connection on the power supply board, if I get 25 volts, that means everything is working coming from the power supply board, and there is most likely a problem with the main board or the cable that connects the two, since when I test on the main board I get a 0, but at the power supply I have 25. If I receive a lower voltage on this test point, closer to 0, then there is most likely a problem with the power supply board, and it can be replaced to see if that fixes the problem. Here is a quick overview of what we have explained and shown in the video. If you do not have backlights turning on, you will want to check the voltages at the test points at the connection going from the main board to the LEDs. If you get the correct voltages at that test point, which is 25 volts, then you most likely have a problem with your LEDs. If you do have 0 volts, since the problem could be with the LEDs or the main board or the power supply, it is recommended that you unplug the TV, then disconnect this cable, plug the TV back in, turn it on, and then recheck the points on the main board to see what voltages you have. If the voltages are at 23, that means that your main board is most likely good and that the LEDs are the problem. If your voltages show as 0, that means that the problem could be with the main board or the power supply. If you do get 0 volts, it is recommended to check the voltages at this connection on the main board that comes from the power supply board. If you have 25 volts here and 0 volts on the connection going to the LEDs, then there is most likely a problem with the main board and you can replace it to see if that fixes the problem. If we have 0 volts here and 0 volts at the connection that goes from the main board to the LEDs, then it is recommended to test at this point on the power supply. If you have normal volts here and 0 volts at both connection points that we mentioned on the main board, then there could be a problem with the power supply and you can replace it to see if that fixes the problem. Now we will show 2 videos showing how to replace the main board and power supply board. Before starting the replacement process, it is recommended to take photos along the way so that you have something to reference for seeing what the parts look like originally in the TV, along with all the connections. Be sure your TV is unplugged. I will start by removing the back cover of the TV so that I can access the boards. I will start by replacing the power supply board. The first thing I will do is disconnect all of the cables from the board. Next, I will remove the screws that hold the board to the TV panel. After I've removed the screws, I can lift the board from the panel. Then I will take my replacement board, line it up correctly, and then screw it to the panel to secure it tightly. Then I can reconnect all of the cables. The next board I'm going to replace is the main board. Once again, I will disconnect all of the cables and then remove the board from the panel by unscrewing it. Then attach your replacement board to the panel with the screws and reconnect all of the cables.